Okay. You did hit the record button now, though, correct?
Yes, ma'am. I sure did.
Okay.
Let me set your slideshow up for you if I can.
Yeah. We need the first one on.
And just let me know when you want me to advance it.
Okay. People drop out of civic and or religious organizations when they are suffering from an overwhelming cluster of pain, problems, pressures, and responsibilities. And there are a number of those kinds of pain, problems, pressures, and responsibilities. The list of those kinds of problems, please, RJ. Includes change in financial status. It might become difficult to pay membership dues. A change in your job, starting a new job and needing more time to get used to those new responsibilities. Getting fired or laid off from your current job. Or a company-wide reduction in force, resulting in more responsibilities for you with no raise. That happened to a member of our family, and he decided just to up and quit. He had some money reserved. Scary medical diagnosis, either for yourself or a loved one. I came real close to dropping out of Toastmasters this past summer. My husband, Mark, had a test that didn't go right. And then I had arthroscopic knee surgery on July the 12th, only 2 weeks after assuming the presidency of West County Toastmasters. And a month later to the date, August the 12th, I was in the hospital because I had a clogged artery. And I was about ready to resign from being the president of West County and downsize to just one club. And I shared my pain, my problems with a couple members of West County. You know them well, David Kincaid and Laura Mather. And they stepped forward and offered me a sabbatical, a couple meetings off from being president so that my heart could recover. They did an intervention. These are the kinds of interventions we need to do when people are suffering a lot of pain and pressure and problems. If you're in the stress of trying to care for your older parents and also raise children, that can be a real stressor. And you might want to drop back from doing volunteer work or belonging to civic organizations. If there's an injury or death of a loved one, or what if you have a stack of pancakes? It's got all of those problems going on. Next slide, please. And then there are two factors in Toastmasters that might cause you to want to drop out. Conflict with a member of the club to which you belong, or change in Toastmasters program and technology. Those of us who grew up prior to the computer era might find it difficult to navigate pathways. And I know that's a challenge for me sometimes. I have a computer. It was a demonstrator model from the floor of the store, and it's got several glitches, and I can't always find all of the pathways features. And when we're going through all these different problems, it feels like the situation will never end, that it's just endless and going on and on and on. It feels like a stack of dirty dishes. How about the there you go. It feels like a stack of dirty dishes about to topple over and fall to the floor. And you want to know, how do I relieve the pressure? How do I remove some of those dirty dishes and reduce them to a manageable size? After all, you can't resign from your family, and you can't stop paying your bills. And most people don't resign from their jobs, although the quiet quitting, which is going on in our society right now, demonstrates just how stressful and untenable the workplace is becoming in many instances. I just read the other day that Elon Musk has told his workers that he wants them to work with such intensity that it feels like a bomb is attached to their backs. Imagine working in a place like that. Just for a show of hands, how many of you are working in a stressful environment like that, where you feel like a bomb or some other pressure point is attached to you? However, you can drop out of a volunteer organization such as Kiwanis or Rotary or Lions Club or Toastmasters. And you might even quit attending worship if things get too rough. But people do send signals. They give clues that they are thinking about dropping out of Toastmasters. And the first clue is the complaint. And we all like to complain. Kevin, in his last hour, talked about how people complain. And it's hard to get people off that pattern of always griping and finding say. But I invite you to interpret the complaint in a different way. It's a subtle cry for help. When someone says something like, you know, Toastmasters just doesn't mean as much to me as it used to. They're not really complaining about Toastmasters. They might be struggling with finding meaning in their lives. And you need, as an officer or as another club member, to ask them a constructive question like, I wonder if there's something else going on in your life where you're searching for meaning. Or maybe there's a complaint about the officers. These officers just don't know what they're doing. Maybe the boss at work acts like they don't know what they're doing. But the criticism has been redirected to a safer place like Toastmasters. You can't confront your boss directly and say, you sure don't know what you're doing. And there are two personality types basically in the world. There are skunks. And RJ has a nice picture of a skunk up here. A skunky Toastmaster is one who sprays the environment. They blame the external forces in life. And they are the types that when they're under a lot of stress, they get angry. They tend to lash out. They might throw a temper tantrum. And then there's the other type, and I bet most of us are like this second type. Then there are turtles. When turtles are under stress, they withdraw and pull inward. These folks, when under too much stress, become depressed. And you, as an officer or a fellow Toastmaster, need to know which personality type you are dealing with when you're trying to prevent them from dropping out. Next slide, please. So the signs start subtly, such as the complaint. And you can step in and provide a listening ear to that complaint. Sometimes the complaint really is the real problem, but other times it's just a presenting problem. And there's something deeper that the individual wants to talk about. They need to bring their pain to speech. They need to name it, and that will stop the cycle of being negative, and they can start becoming happy or joyful. If a certain member won't accept a major responsibility over time, they always want to be the timer, they always want to give the thought for the day or something relatively simple, I think that's a warning sign that they're just not feeling they can be as invested right now. And Mark and I knew a member of one of our clubs who always volunteered to be the timer. And then he eventually dropped out, but he dropped out because his mother-in-law had died. When something like that happens, with their permission, give a hug, send a sympathy card, Let them know how valuable they are as a member. And then if there are a couple cycles of a person not agreeing to be an officer, that's another warning sign. There's one person I'm watching right now in one of our clubs because they'll commit to giving a speech, and then about 30 minutes before the meeting starts, tell us, oh, by the way, I'm not giving the speech after all. I'll come, but I'm not giving the speech. A change in a person's attendance pattern. This is one of the first clues in the church, by the way, in the Protestant church. I'll comment for later on the Catholic church, but the first sign in the Protestant church is someone's about to drop out and become inactive is a change in their attendance pattern. Protestants will keep giving their money even if they quit coming. Now, because of the expectation that Catholics attend worship on a regular basis, they quit giving their money, but will keep coming. And this is applicable to Toastmasters too. People will change their attendance pattern. And then finally, the last thing that happens, and if it gets this far along on the dropout track, we're going to lose them. That's not paying their dues for the next membership period. Those are the warning signs that someone might be feeling too much pressure in their lives and they want to drop out. But if we show care and concern, we can keep them in there. And I have the list here. People want to know that they are really valued. I didn't send RJ a list of these things, and I want to invite a conversation at this point. What are some ways you think would help keep people in your club? Because what happens oftentimes is we welcome a new member and then they go out the back door, either the Zoom back door or the physical back door. So we want to welcome them and then nurture them and help them stay active. So let's have an exchange here. What are some things that might help keep people stay, even when life's really rough? Yes, Sandra?
Have some live events if you have some live events if you can. Like we had a interclub holiday party, and even though a couple people FaceTimed in, it really helped us connect with each other. Sometimes there's so much busyness at a meeting, you don't have time to connect.
Right. That's good. Other suggestions? Just jump in. This isn't school where you have to raise your hand. Just jump in. And if there's competition for the floor, all the better.
Debbie raised her hand.
Debbie?
Yeah, I was just going to say regarding the financial hardship, we have had members in our club who've had financial hardship, and we always kind of have a reserve in our dues, and we will pay dues for 6 months. They can come to the president and the treasurer. It's not announced to the whole club, and the dues are paid for them, and that's kept a couple members for us in the past.
Good suggestion. Anybody else?
I have a good suggestion. I just was thinking about when you were saying that, you know, some people don't feel that they're valued because they tend to volunteer only for the smaller roles. And mentorship is such a big part of that. Being able to find someone that's, you know, maybe not, that they definitely need Toastmasters, but they feel very timid within the club because you have a lot of good speakers, and finding them the right mentor is as important as assigning a mentor, and then allowing them to grow in the way they want to. We just had a very successful meeting where a member that is generally very quiet on Zoom, in the first live meeting, our speaker was ill, and he led a 20-minute table topic session and was well researched and rehearsed with the theme. It was remarkable. And 6 months ago, I was thinking he was probably going to leave us, but taking the time to mentor him, getting through some speeches, and to always tell him thank you for his participation really made a big difference.
Right. I want to jump in and add, taking time for community building at each meeting, or at least if you meet twice a month, at least one of those meetings. I know one of our meetings in capital T, we went around the Zoom screen, and each of us said something positive about the person next to us, so that everybody was affirmed, everybody was praised for something. And we tried to focus on personality characteristics instead of skills, because we want to build up the person as well as the abilities that that individual possesses. And another former president, in fact, I think she's president again, I'll just name her, Sandy Cardis. When she's a president, sends written thank you notes through US mail. She tries to help everybody win the Full Circle Award, which is doing at least once each of the different Toastmaster roles. And then you get a certificate at the end of that membership period for having done each of those. And that's a real feel-good experience.
Sharon, I agree. I was thinking the old-fashioned pick up the phone and call a person when you don't see them and you don't hear from them, and they've been missing for a while. Just that old-fashioned pick up the phone and give them a call.
Exactly, Paula. Even if someone misses just once, I would, within the first 24 to 48 hours, pick up the phone, send a text, drop a card in US mail. I love to get greeting cards. I enjoy going to card shops and buying and sending cards. I also enjoy getting cards. Find out that person's favorite form of communication. I learned that in the president's workshop this morning. And then match them. If they prefer text messages, send a warm, friendly text message. But again, stay away from feeling like they have to make a contribution to the club. You're just valuing their personhood at this point, because I think that's something that's really lacking. We want Toastmasters to be a stress reliever, not an additional stressor, but a stress reliever. How many of you feel better after you've left the Toastmasters meeting? Yeah, most of the time. And offer a listening ear when it's needed. I mean, if someone's just gotten a bad news that they've been diagnosed with cancer, or one of their loved ones has been given a severe diagnosis, or even if you just recently got laid off from a job and you're worried about it, and your self-worth is suffering, offer to go for a cup of coffee or lunch or a phone chat, just something. I mean, Kevin talked about the importance of being happy and positive. I will tweak that. When someone's in pain, they need to talk about the pain, because if they don't talk about it, they're just gonna ruminate and hash and rehash in their heads. But when they can name it, then it loses power over that individual. And then you, the listener, can lead them into a happier frame of mind. But if you don't ever talk about it, it's just going to fester. I'm seeing nods of heads about that. What works for you when you're experiencing stress?
Not on that though. I'll throw one out there for our club. Actually, a member of 2-3 different clubs. It depends on the energy level each person brings to the meeting. Because a lot of times, if I'm coming in with a bad day, that picks me up. I mean, it really makes me feel better about it afterwards.
Right.
I know for me that, part of it is just the stress relieving kind of thing, but sometimes it's about talking to somebody. Sometimes it's about going for a walk and spending some time with things I enjoy. you know, like my pets and stuff like that, so that, you know, I have a place for that extra energy to go. Walking
Right.
is probably the best.
It is. And stretching your arms. So a healthcare professional said that the two activities that release more oxygen through your bloodstream are walking and stretching your arms up like this. And there's also something called breath of joy, where you you breathe in as you hug yourself, and then you breathe out as you stretch. And if you do that, say 5 to 10 times at a sitting or a standing, you'll feel better because there's more oxygen flowing through your body. You might even start a meeting with that. Just everybody take a breath of joy.
Yeah, I was just going to back up that and say maybe that's something we should do at our meetings occasionally, if not every time, just to let people experience physically the joy of being with fellow Toastmasters. That may be a good step.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. Rather than, in addition to praising individuals for their contributions as people, say what Toastmasters means to you. And it's important to have social connections throughout the year. We don't always have to be task-oriented. I'm a very task-oriented person. I have to teach myself to enjoy the journey as well. We joke, Mark's favorite form of transportation is the train. My favorite form of transportation is the airplane. How many of you have other family members who belong to Toastmasters? No?
I have,
I'm second generation Toastmaster.
in fact,
That was a great table topic that you just gave. How many people are trains versus an airplane?
Oh yeah.
I'm going to use that.
Yeah, or maybe it's car or boat. Who knows, Paula? We want to offer, as David and Laura did for me when I had my heart diagnosis, you want to offer assistance to other people when they're going through some challenging times, when those dirty dishes are really piled up and you need to find a way to reduce it to a manageable level. And the other thing I would say, when someone drops out, keep in touch with them, because the other thing is, just as a traumatic event might cause a person to drop out, a change in their lives might be the impetus for rejoining. So someone gets a promotion and all of a sudden they need to make a lot of speeches and presentations to their colleagues at work. Or my dad was at McDonnell Douglas's Toastmasters Club in the 60s and 70s. And he was often assigned to go to the Pentagon and present the proposal from Mac because he could do it in only 3 to 5 minutes. So you might get a promotion like that. Or if you're with Anheuser-Busch, you might be asked to go talk with the Cardinals about something back in the day, or even sell an ad to one of the radio stations or TV channels, or promote the Super Bowl ad. Or even at home, you might want to learn more effective communication skills with your children and partner. There are all kinds of reasons people might want to rejoin. And then when you have a holiday party or some kind of social event, have a homecoming. Invite those who've dropped out and just invite them back. And it's easier to welcome them back to a social event than to a formal meeting.
Yep, I would like to tell a story too.
Okay, Mark.
That we we recently had a new member join one of my clubs here, and he had been a former Toastmaster, active in the district and all that. And when I saw that he was looking for a new Toastmasters club, I didn't even know he had dropped out, but he had dropped out of Toastmasters for a few years. And it was a case too where, you know, some things had happened in his life. He had too much on his plate. He dropped out of Toastmasters, but then he wanted to come back in. And I think that one of the things we need to do when people drop out is kind of help them drop out, not in such a way they don't have any bitterness about Toastmasters. And so then they will think about rejoining Toastmasters later on. And then when he started thinking about joining other Toastmasters clubs, he looked around and visited several different clubs. And he chose our club because we were so friendly and positive. And he knew me and he knew other people in Toastmasters that were, and I think that's important too, to maintain that relationship, you know, over the time when maybe they dropped out, because then that'll help them join up again later.
Thank you, Mark. It's really important, I think, if you want to prevent people from getting too far down on the dropout track, that if they miss a meeting or two, step in right away and reach out to them, and through some constructive questions, try and find out what's going on in their lives and offer support, because Toastmasters is like Weight Watchers. If you miss too many meetings, it is just so hard to come back in. There's a little self-consciousness, there might be a little embarrassment, or it's just harder to break down those barriers again and come back. So you want to keep people in the fold as much as you can. However, there are people that, because they move away or they have Toastmasters has fulfilled their need, we need to bless them and let them move on.
Hey, Sharon, I throw something out there in addition to what you were saying, kind of off this
Sure.
up, but in my years of leadership in different organizations and all that, we have to be cautious as leaders or officers in the club when something's happening, of our perception. Sometimes our approach is tainted by our perception, what we think is going on.
Right, you're right. It may not always be what we think it is. Yeah, and that's why you need to ask constructive questions. Don't ask the question in such a way that sounds like you already know what it is. It's an inviting kind of question, open-ended, that gives people a chance to either correct what you've said or just talk about stuff. I was leading a youth group one night. We were having a lock-in. You all know what lock-ins are, where the kids spend the night at the church. They may come around 8 o'clock and they have pizza, and then they get to stay up all night, and their parents pick them up around 8 o'clock the next morning. And as one of the organizers, I wanted to keep every minute planned, because heaven forbid the kids get bored. We were showing a movie in the middle of the morning around 2, 3 o'clock. And there wasn't a single member of the youth group watching the movie. And the other adults, and I said, oh my goodness, they must be bored. And I walked down the hall to the parlor, and that's where all the youth were sitting. And they said, is it okay if we just sit here and hang out? We need a place to just hang out and talk about real stuff in our lives. We never have a chance to do that. We're so busy with school and sports, all that. And I think Toastmasters can be a place, might even build it into the meeting, where we can just hang out and talk and listen. And we might want to put a time limit on that, but we want to build a caring environment for people, especially as we're emerging from post-COVID. it's still a little scary to get out there. Looks like you're thinking about something. Sue, do you want to chime in with something? Sue Rankin? No?
Yes, you're giving me some really great ideas as president. And I'm looking forward to holding the first meeting of the new year. And I had an idea for that first meeting's theme, but now I'm thinking, are we all going to be burned out from the holidays and we should all just hang out together and listen to each other and do some fun stuff? I think the beginning of the year, I'm going to have everybody stretch. Get the breathing thing going and stretch, and then talk about not demanding what we're going to do for the next year, but kind of regroup. So thanks for the idea. Yeah,
You're welcome.
good idea.
Anybody else have some ideas they want to share? I know we haven't used up all the time, but I'm not sure we have to do that.
No, that's up to you. We've got plenty of time though.
My congregation was always glad when my sermon was a little bit shorter and they got out in less than an hour.
Hey, just a suggestion for Sue. You might be able to do that with an all table topics meeting. You know, what happened over the holidays? What are you glad that why are you glad the holidays are over? Or, hey,
And
how do you feel about the new year? Any kind of stuff like that.
And how did you travel? By train or by airplane?
Yeah. Or car.
I love it. Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Oh, that was just kind of an add-on to the thing from the president's thing this morning, kind of thing where they were, hey, trying to see where everybody's at and what they're interested in.
Yeah.
So, I know.
I think it's, sorry,
ahead.
Tom.
No,
I
that's all
think it's fun just to find out everybody's favorite color. It doesn't have to be a real deep question. It can be fun and whimsical.
Amen to that. I find as the VP, I'm the VPE for Anheuser-Busch, and I'm usually on the phone calling everybody or texting or whatever, trying to get all the roles filled for the next meeting and stuff. And that's kind of a pain, but it's also a benefit in trying to keep contact with all the members. And, you know, a lot of times I have to leave voicemails, and then sometimes they'll call back, sometimes not. But if I keep following up on that, usually I can find out if something's going on. And I really worry when people miss more than a couple of meetings in a row or something like that. So,
yeah. When we met in person, Capital T did a grab bag night one night. There was no agenda plan. You grabbed something out of the bag, and that's what you had to do for the night. So you may have drawn a 5 to 7 minute impromptu speech, which Capital T does. We do full length impromptu speeches at every meeting, and you draw a topic from a list, and then you have maybe 5 minutes to think about what you're going to say. And then we do a round robin evaluation.
have you done that via Zoom?
Yeah. Oh yeah, we do impromptu speeches via Zoom, and then we send suggestions in the chat box at the beginning of the meeting to the person who's been assigned to be the impromptu speaker.
Good.
You want to chime in on that, Mark Strauss?
Well, a couple times we've also given the Toastmaster the authority to tell or suggest to the impromptu speaker that they preach. I'm a preacher too. Speak on that subject. But the thing that Sherry was talking about, we had a grab bag for each role at the meeting. That is really challenging because you might get Wagmaster on 10 minutes notice. So that's a challenging thing. I think you have to be a little bit careful if you want to retain members, not to give them something so challenging that it's stressful. But, you know, our advanced club can do that. And it's kind of fun and challenging for us.
Hey, Sharon, one thing I'll throw out there that we did that was really big on helping clubs grow prior or pre-COVID, I guess, before we could still meet together. And it goes right along with a lot of stuff you've been saying. We'd actually have some clubs within our local area or close to our area get together for a pizza night and just break bread and just share stuff. No, didn't have to be about Toastmasters, but just get together and socialize.
That's a great idea.
One of the traditions of Capital T, that it's a club that goes back about 30 or 40 years. And it was at first kind of a dinner club meeting. They would go somewhere and they go to a different restaurant every meeting. That got to be a little complicated, but when I first joined, we always had the option of gathering for dinner ahead of time. Not everybody could make the dinner, but we would gather for dinner ahead of time, advertise that, and then go and have our meeting at another location, because that usually worked out better. But that's a great way to build up fellowship too and get to know people. And one of the things, I'll just throw this in, one of the reasons I like Capital T was it's all people who are pretty committed to working in the district too. And so these are people you know outside the context of the local club meeting. And that's another way I think you can help retain members, is to get them involved in district meetings and so forth. And that's the way to, I think, cement relations. Sherry was saying that earlier in the program. You know, the more you get involved, the more people will stay involved. It's kind of contrary to what we normally think. But the more and more you can get people involved on a positive level, the more and more they're going to be committed to the whole project. And when I first joined Capital T, and you know, that somebody said, "Well, who's going to the district convention this weekend?" Well, almost everybody was. Unlike some of the other clubs I was, well, what's that? Why do I have to go? You know, so that's just an anecdote to talk about different kinds of clubs and how important it is to get involved on a deeper level to help retain members.
And I do want to say, I mentioned that one of the factors for people dropping out is when a conflict arises in a club. And that can happen because no two objects can occupy the same place at the same time, and there are going to be disagreements and all that. But it's important to have a trusted intermediary who can sit and moderate the discussion and help the two people who are in conflict hear the other side and make peace, because otherwise it can carry over and fester. And I would also say that if you're going to give a speech on a controversial subject, be careful that in the words you use, you don't demonize or judge people who are on the other side of an issue. Because that's not the purpose of Toastmasters. Rather, one of our clubs has people from several different nations who are working here in the St. Louis area. And so we have gotten rid of the Pledge of Allegiance and now state the mission of Toastmasters at the top of the meeting instead of doing the Pledge of Allegiance. Because it's a much more inclusive thing than asking those who are from other nations to sit quietly while we say the Pledge of Allegiance. That took several discussions for our club to reach that point and agree to that.
Following up on some of what Sherry just said too, I think it's important to, they used to say, don't major in the minors, don't quibble a lot about things. And tensions, I think, can rise between members when you quibble about, was that exactly the right word, or what's the exact terminology that should be used. That should be discouraged, I think. And instead, work toward the major developing people's skills and not quibbling about smaller things.
And be sensitive to people's disabilities also. I mean, I have a neurological condition where I can't keep my head on straight. And there were evaluators who would criticize my neck. That would be one of the things I needed to improve on. Well, I get Botox injections every 90 days at WashU Center for Advanced Medicine. But beyond that, there's not much that can be done about that. And so I would just say be sensitive to any club member who might have some kind of condition which they can't control. And don't make that part of the evaluation. Some of this is pretty obvious, but then again, we don't always think of it. Are there any closing comments? I want to thank all of you for coming and for being active participants. Anybody else want to say something?
I was going to piggyback on what you just said about the disability issue a little bit. Sherry, if I may, about you can be sensitive to strobe lights too. And sometimes if people inadvertently do things, especially on an online meeting where they're doing pulsing lights, that can be an issue for Sherry and maybe others. And you have to be sensitive to that. And so oftentimes, unfortunately, it falls upon the shoulders of the person who has this difficulty to say, oh, I can't do that, don't do that. And, you hope that the person who's doing that is sensitive to the problem and will understand that needs to be addressed. Oh, you don't mind me saying that, Sherry, but
No, that's okay.
I know that to be a case.
So. Okay, well, thank you so much. I hope you continue to have a very informative and inspirational day here at TLI. And I'm looking forward